Good day. My name is Roger Bellman, and I'd like to discuss with you the concepts of fire technology, codes, and prevention in my area. Identify the basic concept of education, enforcement, and engineering in fire prevention. These concepts play a crucial role in fire prevention, protecting lives and property, and promoting a culture of fire safety. Here is an overview of how they apply to fire prevention. Education. Education in fire prevention involves raising awareness, providing information, and promoting knowledge about fire risks, fire, fire safety practices, and emergency preparedness. The gain is to empower stakeholders to take proactive steps to preventing fires, respond effectively in emergencies, and protect themselves and others from harm so that they can foster a culture of prevention and preparedness, reduce fire related incidents, and save lives. Enforcement. Enforcing fire codes, regulations, and standards ensure compliance with fire safety requirements, hence reduce fire risks. Enforcement actions may include issuing citations or penalties for violations. By enforcing fire safety regulations, property owners and occupiers are held accountable for maintaining safe conditions and uphold a minimum level of fire protection for the community. Engineering. Engineering involves the design, construction, and implementation of fire protection systems to minimize fire risks and increase fire resistance in structures and occupancies. Fire and smoke alarm systems, sprinkler systems, and other fire suppression technologies are examples of engineering principles which can enhance the fire resistance of structures, improve occupant safety, and reduce property damage in the event of a fire. Explain how code is enforced in your area. In Florida, code is enforced through inspections and compliance notice, which can yield into penalties. For example, in my power plant, it can also void of warranties, insurances, and can even force limited power output in our grid. For example, in our combustion turbine generators, we have a fire suppression system that must be inspected and tested every 2 years. This includes testing all sensors, fusible plugs, suppression valves, and management systems, along with a functional check of the extinguishing deployment system. Describe how your local jurisdiction applies code to new and existing occupancies. In my workplace in Florida, the fire safety infrastructure must be in compliance with the National Fire Protection Association 850, which covers recommended practices for fire protection for electric generating plants and high voltage direct current converter stations. In new occupancies, construction companies build power plants in according to fire codes and they are inspected while being built, ensuring they are constructed according to the NFPA 850 building code. In existing occupancies, our company applies code based on our own standard operating procedure SOPR number 222, which has been deployed through reference of NFPA 251 and OSHA CFR 1910 subpart L. Identify local organizations that determine fire resistance of building materials. In Florida, we are more focused in two organizations that determine fire resistance in building materials. One, National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. The NFPA is a leading organization that develops and publishes fire protection and life safety codes and standards, specifically NFPA 251, Standard Method of Fire Test of Building Construction and Materials. This provides procedures for testing the fire resistance of building materials and assemblies. 2. ASTM International. ASTM International is a standard organization that develops and publishes voluntary consensus standards for a wide range of materials and products. ASTM E119, the standard test methods for fire test of building construction and materials, outlines procedures for evaluating the fire resistive properties of building materials and assemblies. Identify the type of test used to determine fire rating of certain building components, materials in your area. In Florida, ASTM E84 test. That's one of them, which is a test measures the surface burning characteristics of building materials. It evaluates how far and how fast flames spread across the surface of the material. The results are expressed as a flame spread index and smoke develop index. ASTM E119 test, also known as the standard test method for fire test of building construction and materials. This evaluates the fire resistance of building materials. It measures how well a material can withstand fire exposure for a period without collapsing or allowing fire to spread to the unexposed side. There's the NFPA 286 test. This test evaluates the fire propagation characteristics of exterior wall assemblies and panels under specified fire exposure conditions. It assesses both flame propagation and smoke development. NFPA 701 test. This evaluates the flammability of textiles and films under specific conditions. While primarily used for textiles, it can also apply to certain building materials like curtains or drapes. UL 1709 test. This test evaluates the fire resistance of structured steel, particularly in hydrocarbon fire environments. It's essential for materials used in petrochemical facilities or industrial settings. Then there's NFPA 259 test. Now this test measures the resistance of materials to radiant heat exposure. It's crucial for materials that may be exposed to intense heat sources, such as those in close proximities of fireplaces or industrial processes. And then there's UL 94 test, and this test evaluates the flammability of plastic materials. It's particularly important for materials used in electrical enclosures or other applications where fire resistance is critical. Describe how fire tests and fire ratings apply to inspection and code enforcement in my area. In Florida, fire tests and fire ratings play a crucial role in inspection and code enforcement to ensure buildings meet strict fire safety hazards. And here's how they apply. 1. Building code compliance. The Florida Building Code, FBC, includes specific requirements related to fire safety, including provisions for fire resistance, flame spread, smoke production, and other factors. Building materials must meet certain fire ratings to be considered compliant with the code. 2. Permitting processes. During the permitting process for new construction, renovations, or alteration, building plans are reviewed to ensure compliance with fire safety requirements. This includes verifying that proposed building materials have the necessary fire ratings for their intended use. Inspections. Inspectors conduct on-site inspections throughout the construction process to verify that materials and methods are in compliance with the approved plans and applicable codes. This includes checking fire-rated assemblies such as walls, doors, windows, and other elements to ensure they meet the required standard. 4. Testing and certification. Building materials may undergo testing by accredited laboratories to determine their fire performance characteristics. Manufacturers often provide certification or test reports to demonstrate compliance with relevant standards. Inspectors may request these documents as part of the inspection process to verify that materials meet the required fire ratings. 5. Occupancy inspections. Before a building can be occupied, it must undergo a final inspection to ensure it meets all applicable code requirements, including those related to fire safety. Inspectors pay particular attention to fire-rated assemblies and systems such as fire doors, fire alarms, sprinkler systems, and emergency exits to ensure they are properly installed and functioning. 6. Code enforcement. Code enforcement officials are responsible for enforcing compliance with the Florida Building Code and other relevant regulations. If violations are identified during inspections or through complaints, enforcement actions may be taken, including citations, fines, or orders to correct deficiencies. Public safety. The ultimate goal of fire testing and code enforcement in Florida is to protect public safety by reducing the risk of fire-related incidents and ensuring that buildings provide adequate protection for occupants and property in the event of a fire. Identify characteristics of unsafe structures in your area as they relate to code requirements. Unsafe structures in Florida can exhibit various characteristics and indicate non-compliance with building codes and pose significant risk of occupants, neighboring properties, and public safety. Here are some common characteristics of unsafe structures in Florida as they relate to code requirements. 1. Structural instability. Unsafe structures such as leaning walls, sagging roof, or visible cracks in load-bearing elements are indications of inadequate design, poor construction practices, or deterioration over time, all of which may violate structural integrity requirements in building codes. 2. Lack of maintenance. Neglected maintenance can include structural deterioration, and it can lead to compromised fire resistance and unsafe conditions. Examples include damage or missing roofing materials, deteriorated building facades, or overgrown vegetation that obstructs emergency egress routines or access for firefighting equipment. 3. Electrical hazards. Unsafe electrical installations pose fire and electrocution hazards. Signs of electrical code violations include exposed wiring, overloaded circuits, improperly installed outlets, switches, and the use of outdated or damaged electrical components. Fire code violations. Buildings may be deemed unsafe if they fail to meet the code requirements for fire resistance, means of egress, fire detections, and suppression systems. Examples include blocked or obstructed exits, inadequate fire separations between units, missing or malfunctioning smoke alarms, or lack of fire extinguishers. Health and sanitation issues. Unsafe structures may have unsanitary conditions that pose health risk to occupants and neighboring properties. This can include mold growth, pest infestations, sewage backups, inadequate sanitation facilities, or accumulations of garbage or debris. Accessibility barriers. Buildings must comply with accessibility standards to ensure equitable access for people with disabilities. Unsafe structures may have barriers such as inaccessible entrances, narrow doorways, steep ramps, or lack of accessible parking spaces or restroom facilities. violating requirements set forth in the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, and Florida Accessibility Code. And then there's zoning violations. Unsafe structures may be in violation of zoning regulations, such as illegal occupancy, non-compliant land use, or building setbacks. These violations can result in unsafe living or working conditions and may trigger enforcement actions from local zoning authorities. Identify the building construction type in your area that poses the biggest hazard for potential configuration and fire spread. In Florida, buildings constructed with lightweight wood framing pose a significant hazard for potential configuration and fire spread. This construction type, commonly referred to as Type V construction, is prevalent in residential and commercial structures, particularly in low-rise buildings. Type V construction typically involves the use of lightweight materials such as wood framing, plywood, and oriented strand board, or OSB. That's OSB sheathing, and gypsum board for inferior finishes. While these materials are cost-effective and widely available, they are also highly combustible compared with other construction materials like masonry or concrete. The lightweight wood framing used in Type V construction can ignite quickly in the event of a fire, and once ignited, flames can spread rapidly throughout the building. Additionally, the open cavities and voids within the wood framing provide pathways for fire to travel vertically and horizontally, further accelerating fire spread. In areas prone to hurricanes, like Florida, where strong winds can exacerbate fire conditions and spread flames to neighboring structures, the risk associated with lightweight wood framing construction is even higher. To mitigate the hazards posed by Type V construction, Florida Building Code include requirements for fire-resistant materials, fire barriers, and fire suppression systems. However, the widespread use of lightweight wood framing means the building of this construction type remain vulnerable to fire-related incidents, emphasizing the importance of fire prevention methods and robust firefighting capabilities in the state. Plans review and structural control are means of fire protection would improve the safety of unsafe structures in my area. Plans review. Before construction or renovation begins, building plans must undergo a thorough review by qualified professionals, typically within the local building department. During this process, plans are evaluated to ensure compliance with building codes, including fire safety requirements. A comprehensive plan review can identify potential hazards and deficiencies in structural design, fire resistance, means of egress, fire detections, and suppression systems, among other aspects. By addressing these issues proactively, plans review help prevent the construction of unsafe structures and ensure the building and designs to withstand the fire-related risks. Now, constructional control measures are implemented throughout the construction process to ensure that buildings are constructed in accordance with approved plans and applicable building codes. This involves inspections by building department personnel or third-party inspectors at key stages of construction, including foundation, framing, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection systems. Structural control inspections verify that materials and methods are used in construction meet required standards for structural integrity, fire resistance, and other safety conditions. By enforcing compliance with approved plans and building codes, structural controls help prevent deviation that could compromise the safety of structures, including fire-related hazards. By integrating plans review and structural control as essential components of fire protection measures, unsafe structures in Florida can be identified and remediated before they pose a significant risk to occupants, neighborhood properties, and public safety. These processes help ensure that buildings are designed, constructed, and maintained to meet stringent fire safety standards, reduce the likelihood of fire-related incidents, and enhancing overall safety in the built environment.